The more you force it, the emptier you become. Grace can carry what striving never could. What if the thing draining you is not only the burden itself, but the way you keep trying to save yourself from it? When pressure rises, most people move faster. Doing nothing feels dangerous, so the hands begin to work before the heart has become still. We reach for a way to change the situation, relieve the tension, or produce an answer with our own strength. Yet some burdens do not grow lighter when we wrestle with them. They grow heavier. The tighter we hold on, the more tired the heart becomes. The more we try to manufacture peace for ourselves, the farther peace seems to drift away. There is a reason for that. Two people can walk through the same kind of lack and come out very differently. One keeps turning toward God and remains inwardly steady. The other becomes drained, restless, and quietly ruled by private methods. The difference is not always the size of the problem. Very often, it is the place where the heart goes first. Many people know what it is like for their hands to move before their faith does. That is why the first thing to examine is not only the situation in front of us, but the center of the heart. Who are we really relying on right now? The more we try to force life open, the heavier life becomes. When the heart turns toward God, grace often begins opening something before the answer itself appears. What exhausts a person is not always a major crisis. Sometimes it is one unresolved place that stays with them for a very long time. Life continues. Responsibilities remain. The days keep moving. Yet inside the heart, one unfinished matter keeps returning. During busy hours it may go quiet, but in still moments that empty place becomes visible again. When one missing piece keeps pulling the attention, a person slowly begins living more in what is absent than in what is present. That is when the balance of the soul begins to shift. The story of Leah and Rachel shows this with unusual clarity. Both women lived with a form of lack. One suffered because she was not loved the way she longed to be loved. The other suffered because what she deeply desired had not yet come. Their pain looked different on the outside, but inside each heart there was a place that felt incomplete. The danger was not simply that something was missing. The danger began when that missing place started controlling the way they saw everything else. When the heart stays tied to one empty place for too long, what has not yet come begins to look larger than the grace that has already been given. Lack stops feeling like a simple absence. It begins changing interpretation, disturbing emotion, and tightening the center of the heart. What starts as disappointment can become comparison. Comparison can deepen into resentment. Resentment can harden into impatience. When someone stares too long at what is missing, they eventually lose the strength to live fully in what is still present. Gratitude weakens. Prayer grows unstable. One closed door starts feeling like the explanation for the whole life. That is why lack is so dangerous. It captures focus before it captures anything else. Once focus is taken, everything begins to be interpreted through that one unresolved place. In the same circumstances, one person continues with gratitude while another collapses under pressure. The difference is often not the situation itself, but where the eyes are fixed. Faith is not pretending pain does not exist. Faith is refusing to let pain become the center of everything. The ache may remain. The questions may remain. Yet faith keeps turning the eyes back toward God before the heart is defined by what is missing. Perhaps your heart is in a similar place now. On the outside, you may be managing well. Inside, one area may keep drawing your thoughts back again and again. The longer that lack remains, the more the mind analyzes, compares, and carries the weight of a future that has not yet arrived. Over time, the soul grows tired, not only because of the problem itself, but because an external burden has quietly taken over the inner center. That is the place where a person must stop and look carefully. The moment lack captures attention, it also begins capturing direction. God does not first call his people to a life without lack. He calls them to a life in which lack does not become their master. He does not ask us to deny pain. He asks us not to let one empty place define the meaning of the whole life. God is greater than the empty place within us. When focus returns to him, the order of the heart begins to return as well. Once that order returns, another path can open. When waiting goes on longer than expected, a quiet pressure starts building inside the heart. At first, it feels manageable. You assume you can endure it. You tell yourself that time will eventually straighten things out. But when the waiting stretches beyond what you expected, something inside begins to change. You become more sensitive to the same situation. Small things affect you more than they once did. Even when everything looks normal on the outside, one heavy thought keeps living underneath the surface. At that point, a person begins facing something more dangerous than lack itself: impatience. Impatience is not simply wanting something to happen quickly. It is the force that makes you trust your own timing more than God's timing. Instead of waiting for him to act, you begin to feel that you must act first. Surrender starts to feel uncertain. Control starts to look safer. As impatience grows, stillness becomes harder. Something inside insists that this must be fixed now or nothing will ever change. When that pressure fills the heart, prayer becomes thinner while calculation becomes heavier. Rachel's pain was real and her waiting was long. But when pain no longer remains before God as prayer, it slowly turns into pressure. A person who stays before God with a problem is quietly strengthened from within. A person driven by impatience begins moving outward faster and faster. That is often how life starts to break apart, not because faith disappears all at once, but because anxiety quietly steps in front of faith. An impatient heart almost always sounds reasonable. It says that waiting too long is dangerous. It says doing nothing is irresponsible. It says action is wiser than silence. That is why people so often mistake impatience for wisdom. Planning can look mature. Quick decisions can look strong. Constant movement can look responsible. Yet the fastest decision is not always the safest one, and the busiest mind is not always the most faithful one. The person who trusts God is not someone who refuses to act, but someone who first places the heart in God's hands. Scripture says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him and he will act." That is the order a weary heart needs. First commit, then trust. Impatience reverses that order. We hold on, then pray. We calculate, then ask God to confirm. We build a plan, then ask him to bless it. Outwardly, we may still use the language of faith, yet inwardly, the center of trust has already shifted. That may be where your heart is now. The problem is still unresolved, but your thoughts have already run far ahead of you. You may have prayed, yet your mind is still searching for another exit. You say that you trust God, while inwardly you feel pressure to solve everything yourself. In that condition, what is needed is not more calculation. What is needed is a pause deep enough to keep impatience from becoming the master of your direction. When the hands move before God, it may look like you are finding answers. In reality, you may be losing peace. The door forced open by anxiety rarely gives rest. More often, it dries the heart. When impatience remains in the heart long enough, it begins appearing on the outside. What once felt like quiet inner pressure changes the way a person reacts, speaks, and decides. As the strength to wait grows weaker, demands grow stronger. As surrender fades, the hands become busier. That is where force begins. Force is not merely a strong personality or a determined attitude. It is the restless energy that appears when trust in God's timing starts to weaken. It is the urge to push open a door that only God can open, or to obtain through calculation what should be received through grace. On the surface, force can look like passion or responsibility. At the center, it is something else. True longing draws a person closer to God. Force slowly convinces a person that the result must be created by personal effort. As force grows stronger, the soul loses its softness. Patience disappears. Rest fades from the inside. Rachel's pain was real, and the waiting was long. Yet when that pain no longer remained before God as prayer, her heart began moving in another direction. People do not collapse only because of what they lack. They begin to collapse when, in the middle of lack, they start trusting their own hands more than God. From that moment, life becomes heavier. On the outside, there may still be movement. Inside, the center keeps shaking. When force replaces prayer, a person slowly begins justifying everything. This much effort seems acceptable. Waiting starts to look irresponsible. Personal methods begin to feel normal. Little by little, the heart becomes comfortable carrying what it was never meant to carry. That path may create movement, but it does not create peace. In many cases, it creates more tension, because anything started by force must be maintained by force. If you push a door open with your own strength, you will feel that you must keep holding it open with the same strength. That is why so much forced living leaves a person more anxious and more tired. This is the difference between prayer and force. Prayer connects a person to God. Force ties a person back to themselves. Prayer teaches the heart its limits. Force pushes the heart to deny those limits. Prayer allows the soul to remain steady when results are slow. Force shakes the whole person when results do not appear quickly. From the outside, both may look like strong desire. Their fruit is completely different. Prayer gives life to the soul. Force slowly dries the soul from the inside. What we can hold may calm us for a moment, but it cannot sustain the soul. When anxiety grows, people begin trying to hold on to something visible. Waiting for unseen grace requires trust and patience. Holding something tangible gives immediate reassurance. When the heart feels unstable, it starts looking for something it can explain, calculate, and rely on. Even a small visible possibility can temporarily calm the mind. That is how human solutions begin to gain power. They do not always arrive in dramatic form. Sometimes it is a realistic alternative, someone's advice, a plan that sounds reasonable, an opportunity that promises relief, or a practical path that seems easier to control. At first it looks like a simple tool, something temporary, something harmless. But when anxiety attaches itself to that tool, it stops being a tool and becomes the support of the heart. From that point, a person begins expecting that visible solution to hold life together instead of looking to God. That is dangerous because it often looks practical and wise on the outside, while deep inside, the center of trust has already shifted. The mandrakes in Scripture point to that moment. They were not merely a plant, they became a visible hope, something that seemed to offer control and certainty. Instead of waiting for grace, the heart wanted something it could hold. Instead of trusting God's timing, it preferred a small but visible possibility. In life now, the mandrakes may look like money, a person, an opportunity, a backup plan, an arrangement, or any alternative that promises quick reassurance. People try to feel safe through these things, but that safety never goes very deep. They become more anxious, hoping that what they are holding will not collapse. That reveals the limitation of human solutions. They may calm the mind for a moment, but they cannot sustain the soul for a lifetime. What we hold in our hands cannot become the foundation of our lives. Even when it looks realistic, intelligent, or widely accepted as the right answer, it may only be covering fear instead of healing the heart. Anything built on our control must be constantly protected by our control. That is why it produces tension instead of peace. This is the place for honest questions. What are you holding right now for security? Are you truly trusting God, or are you calling on His name while placing your real expectations somewhere else? The heart always reveals what it trusts. What we constantly check, think about, and depend on usually exposes where our trust is resting. Sometimes God allows the small certainties we cling to be shaken, not to harm us, but to lead us somewhere deeper and safer. As long as we refuse to release what we are holding, we cannot learn the place of grace. When our plans fail, when our expectations weaken, and when our alternatives cannot give us peace, something important starts becoming clear. What we were really looking for was not only an answer, we were looking for a way to feel safe without depending fully on God. But God does not save us that way. He leads us into a slower path, but a deeper one. A simpler path, but a safer one. In that place, security is no longer found in what we can hold, but in Him. Real change is not first about method, it is about direction. When life begins to shake, most people immediately ask how to fix the problem. The mind starts searching for solutions, calculating possibilities, trying to decide which path will hurt less. But what changes a life is not first finding the perfect method. It is deciding where the heart will turn. When trouble appears, people usually think they are searching for answers. In reality, they are often searching for a place of safety. When that place is not God, the heart may keep moving, but it will never truly rest. Someone's opinion becomes the standard. A practical alternative begins to feel more reliable. Personal judgment starts sounding more convincing than God's guidance. If that pattern continues long enough, faith may still remain in words, while the actual direction of life has already changed. A person may appear to be walking with God, while the heart is quietly leaning toward another exit. That is why the deepest question is not whether you know about God. It is where you go first. When life begins to shake, the first direction of the heart reveals its true center. One person turns toward God, even without answers. Another turns first toward visible alternatives, faster solutions, clearer explanations, and paths that promise quicker relief. From the outside, both may look serious and responsible. The fruit is entirely different. The one who goes to God first does not collapse inside, even while the problem continues. The one who holds alternatives first keeps shaking, even while holding something tangible in the hands. Faith is not the ability to collect more information. Faith is the strength to keep the order of going to God first. When that order is restored, the way a person sees problems begins to change. What once felt suffocating slowly becomes clearer. The situation may not disappear immediately, but the posture of the soul changes. Fear may still rise, but it no longer becomes the master. Frustration may remain, but it no longer consumes the whole heart. Many people look for peace in results. God often corrects direction before He changes results. A result gained in the wrong direction can leave a person even more anxious, but a person whose direction is set toward God does not become empty while waiting. Waiting may continue, tears may still come, yet waiting does not destroy that person. When trouble appears, the first task is not to choose a method, but to decide where the heart will turn. The person who goes to God first does not wait until everything is understood. Even without understanding, that person places the heart before Him. From that place, grace begins, not first as the power to change the situation, but as the power to steady the heart. God opens the way by grace, not by force. Turning your direction toward God does not mean everything immediately becomes easy. In fact, that is often where the deeper test begins. You have prayed. You have stepped back from forcing things. You are trying to trust. Yet nothing changes right away. When there is no visible result, the heart begins to struggle again. You start asking whether you are doing the right thing, whether waiting is a mistake, whether trust has become passivity. But the heart of faith is not built on receiving things quickly. It is built on the conviction that the way God works is deeper and safer than the way we try to control life. People naturally think about results first. They assume that once the problem is solved, peace will return. Once the door opens, the heart will finally rest. It feels as though everything would come back into place if only one missing piece were given. But God looks deeper than the result. He looks at the heart that receives the result and at the path through which that result is received. When something is taken by force, tension remains in the heart. When something is received by grace, gratitude remains in the heart. Outwardly, the results may look similar. Inside the soul, the outcome is very different. That is why grace matters so much. Grace is not merely a gift that fills what is missing. Grace is God's way of shaping the heart of the person who receives. What we create by our own strength begins to feel like something we must protect with our own strength. What God gives leads the heart into humility, rest, and trust. Grace deals with the center before it deals with the result. God is not concerned only with whether we receive what we want. He is also concerned with whether we become the kind of people who can receive it in the right way. Even long waiting is not wasted time, because during that waiting he is still working on the direction and order of the heart. Many people misunderstand grace because it looks slow. Quick solutions feel realistic and practical, while waiting for God's timing can feel uncertain. In reality, the opposite may be true. What we rush to create may bring temporary relief. What God gives through grace reaches places we could never heal by our own effort. Human effort can move the surface of life. Grace touches the roots. Human plans can see the next step. God prepares seasons beyond the next step. Trusting God is not doing nothing. It is believing that His goodness is more reliable than our control. It is accepting that His hands are more accurate than ours, even when things do not happen in the time or shape we expected. Yet this is where faith grows deeper. It moves from shallow comfort into real trust. Grace does not make a person passive. Grace makes a person steady. Even when doors remain closed, the heart does not collapse. Even when answers are delayed, God is not absent. Under pressure, people instinctively reach for what can be explained and controlled. A path that makes sense feels safer. A visible alternative feels more reliable. A logical decision can start feeling closer than God's guidance. During that process, the center of the heart begins to move. The lips may still call on God, but the real expectation may already be leaning somewhere else. That is why the most important question is not whether we say we believe in God. It is whether the heart is going to Him first when life becomes unstable. The true direction of the soul is exposed in moments of pressure. Faith asks a simple and searching question. Is my heart trying to create an answer, or is my heart going to God first? Many people are tired, not only because of their problems, but because they try to open too many paths before they go to God. They carry tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. They try to solve scenes that have not yet happened. They knock on doors that are not yet ready to open. When direction becomes unclear and methods become many, a person becomes busy without becoming peaceful. Scripture says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding." That word speaks directly into moments of uncertainty. When trouble appears, people naturally want to rely on their own judgment because it feels faster, more realistic, and more controllable. Yet God tells us to stop there and trust Him first. When that order is broken, a person may look like they are searching for answers while actually wandering inside their own anxiety. The person who turns toward God first is not someone who already has the answers. It is someone who has decided not to lose God while the answers are still missing. Even when doors remain closed, that person goes to Him. Even when the road is unclear, that person goes to Him. Even when the heart is shaking, that person stands before Him with that shaking heart. That difference is decisive. The person who goes to God first does not collapse completely even without solutions, because the foundation is not the answer. The foundation is God Himself. He does not always show the whole path at once. He gives enough light for the next step. That light may not remove uncertainty immediately, but it shows the heart where to stand. Once direction is set toward God, even if the situation does not change right away, the soul no longer collapses in the same way. God does not forget. The hardest time to endure is not always open suffering. Sometimes it is the long, quiet stretch when nothing seems to happen. You have prayed. You have poured out your heart. You have stepped back from forcing things with your own hands. Yet the scene around you still looks unchanged. The door remains closed. The waiting continues. The heart starts to shake again. In that moment, one of the deepest tests of faith begins. The thought appears that maybe God is not simply slow. Maybe he has forgotten. This is where faith must hold on to something stronger than emotion. God does not forget. Time may pass. People may grow tired. Original hope may begin to weaken. God still does not lose sight of our lives. Even when we feel forgotten, he is still working in places we cannot see. What looks like silence to us is not silence to him. Behind the stillness, where nothing appears to change, he is preparing the next part of the story. That truth matters because people often collapse not only under pain, but under the feeling of being forgotten. A person can endure lack for a long time. It is much harder to endure the idea that life is being overlooked. Once someone starts feeling forgotten, expectations are lowered to protect the heart from more disappointment. Hope is held back so the heart will hurt less. Yet the truth that God remembers is more than a comforting idea. It means our lives are still in his hands. It means the story is not finished. Everything we try to hold by our own strength eventually reaches its limit. Plans can fail, expectations can collapse. Paths we were certain would open can suddenly close. What ultimately holds a person is not personal strength, but God's faithfulness. Even when we become weak, God does not become weak. Even when we cannot see the way, God does not lose the way. Even when we shake in waiting, God does not shake. When that truth settles into the heart, something deep starts changing. The greatest grace at the end of waiting is not only receiving what we wanted, it is learning who must be trusted while waiting. A person who has passed through a long season of delay begins to see that life cannot be sustained by personal strength alone. That realization is not defeat, it is the beginning of real faith. Do not lean too quickly toward despair. If God seems quiet, it does not mean he is far away. If nothing has changed yet, it does not mean he has ignored you. If your hands feel empty now, it does not mean your life has been forgotten. The life God remembers still moves toward the next chapter through grace. Tears may remain, doors may remain closed, yet the center of the heart does not have to be lost, because a life remembered by God is never finished too early. Bring the heart back into the right place. The answer is not pushing harder or forcing open what grace has not yet opened. Human plans may look faster, but God's grace is deeper and safer than anything we can produce for ourselves. He may seem slow, but he does not forget. He may seem silent, but he is still working. He may not change everything immediately, but he is already preparing what comes next. Place your heart in God's hands again. Stop trying to control what only he can carry well. Trust that he sees farther than you can see. Life does not change because we push harder. Life changes when the heart returns to the one who leads it. When we stop trying to open every door ourselves and begin trusting the doors God opens, something becomes clear. Doors opened by force demand more force. Doors opened by grace bring peace with them. Do not rush ahead of God. Do not trade your peace for control. Return to prayer. Trust his timing. Walk with him step by step. The life led by God may not always feel fast. It is still safe. And the door opened by grace will never require you to become your own savior just to keep it open.